The day the galaxy came knocking. Captain Sarah Chen was enjoying her morning tea when the biggest diplomatic convoy in galactic history materialized outside Earth's atmosphere. She nearly dropped her cup as every sensor on the orbital station, Harmony, started beeping at once. 73 ships had just appeared out of nowhere, each one looking like a floating palace covered in lights and decorative panels. Sarah set down her tea and leaned forward in her command chair. The station was small compared to what had just arrived, but it had been home for 2 years. She had been monitoring deep space communications and tracking asteroid movements. This was definitely not an asteroid. "Commander Rodriguez, are you seeing this?" Sarah called to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez. He was staring at his screen with wide eyes, his coffee forgotten on the desk beside him. "Captain, I'm reading 73 contacts. They're enormous, but they're not moving in any formation I recognize. Some of them look like they're struggling to maintain position." Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the amazement underneath. Sarah pulled up the visual feed on her main screen and couldn't help but smile. The alien ships were beautiful but completely impractical. They looked like someone had taken every fancy architectural design in history and tried to make them fly. Gold decorations, crystal spires, and flowing curves covered every surface. One ship appeared to be shaped like a giant flower, while another resembled a floating cathedral. "They're gorgeous," Sarah said, watching as several ships nearly collided while trying to arrange themselves in what looked like a ceremonial formation. "But do they actually know how to fly those things?" Marcus was running scans on the fleet. "Captain, their energy signatures are all over the place. Some ships are using 10 times more power than they need just to stay in position, and their communication systems are broadcasting on about 50 different frequencies simultaneously." Sarah watched as the flower-shaped ship slowly rotated, apparently trying to point its front toward Earth. The rotation took nearly 10 minutes, and the ship had to fire its engines constantly just to avoid drifting into its neighbors. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Marcus reported, his hands flying over his controls. "Actually, we're receiving about 20 different transmissions, all at the same time. They seem to be arguing about who gets to talk first." "Let's hear it," Sarah said, settling back in her chair with her tea. The screen filled with a dozen different alien faces, all talking at once. There was a tall, elegant being with silver skin and flowing robes, a creature that looked like a walking crystal formation, something that resembled a friendly mushroom, and several others that defied easy description. They were all speaking in different languages, but the universal translator was working overtime to keep up. "Greetings, primitive world. I am High Ambassador Velthera of the Crystalline Hegemony, and I have the honor of speaking first according to Protocol 47B, said the crystal being. "Actually, the ethereal collective has precedence in first contact situations involving carbon-based species," interrupted the silver-skinned being, whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "The Mushroom Federation protests this entire procedure," added the mushroom-like creature in a surprisingly deep voice. "We should be following the guidelines established at the Third Galactic Convention." Sarah looked at Marcus, who was trying not to laugh. She reached for her microphone and opened a channel to the alien fleet. "Hello everyone, this is Captain Sarah Chen of Earth's orbital station Harmony. Welcome to our solar system. I hate to interrupt, but you all seem to be having some trouble with your formation flying. Would you like some help with that?" The alien chatter stopped immediately. All dozen faces on the screen turned to stare at her, with expressions that ranged from confusion to mild offense. High Ambassador Galthera spoke first, her crystalline form shifting colors. "We are the Galactic Council, representatives of 47 advanced civilizations. We have come to formally welcome Earth into the galactic community. This is a moment of great significance that has been planned according to precise protocols." "That's wonderful," Sarah replied cheerfully. "And we're honored to meet you. But seriously, that big ship that looks like a rose is about to crash into the one that looks like a musical instrument. You might want to give them some room to maneuver." Marcus pulled up a tactical display showing the alien fleet's positions. Several ships were indeed drifting dangerously close to each other, their elaborate decorations making it difficult to judge distances. "Captain Chen," said the silver-skinned being, "I am Harmonist Nexus of the Ethereal Collective. Perhaps you do not understand the significance of this moment. We are here to share the wisdom of the galaxy with your species. The formation you see represents the traditional welcome pattern, unchanged for 3,000 years. Sarah took a sip of her tea and studied the pattern. It's very pretty, but it doesn't look very stable. How long did it take you to arrange yourselves like that? There was a pause before Harmonist Nexus answered. Approximately 14 hours. The precision required is quite demanding. 14 hours. Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. To arrange 73 ships. How do you handle emergency situations? We have protocols for emergencies as well, said a new voice. A bear-like creature with 6 arms appeared on screen. I am Battle Sage Thormund of the Warrior Clans. Our emergency formations can be achieved in as little as 6 hours. Marcus was studying his sensors again. Captain, 3 of their ships are showing signs of mechanical stress. I think they're having trouble maintaining position in that formation. Sarah opened her communication channel again. Look, we don't want to be rude, but some of your ships look like they're struggling. Why don't you break formation and find more comfortable positions? We can talk just as easily if you're not all bunched up together. The alien representatives looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, High Ambassador Velthera spoke. The protocols clearly state that first contact must be conducted in the traditional manner. We cannot simply abandon procedures that have been followed for millennia. But what if the procedures don't work? Sarah asked. What if they're actually making things harder? The question seemed to stun the alien delegation. They looked at each other in confusion, apparently having never considered such a possibility. The protocols work because they have always worked, said Harmonist Nexus, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. But they're not working now, Sarah pointed out gently. Your ships are having trouble, your communication is chaotic, and you've been trying to arrange yourselves for 14 hours. Maybe it's time to try something different. Battle Sage Thormund's 6 arms were gesturing emphatically. The young human speaks wisdom. Perhaps rigid adherence to ancient ways is not always the path to success. Heresy, exclaimed the mushroom-like creature. The Federation has followed these protocols for 5,000 years. And how many species have you successfully contacted using these protocols? Sarah asked. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Well, said High Ambassador Galthera eventually, most species are too primitive to appreciate the significance of proper first contact procedures. They usually just surrender immediately. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. They surrender? Why would they surrender? Because we arrive with a fleet of 73 ships, explained Harmonist Nexus. The display our combined technological might usually convinces them to submit to galactic authority without resistance. But we're not surrendering, Sarah said. We're trying to help you fly better. The alien representatives looked genuinely confused by this response. Apparently, helpful suggestions were not part of their usual first contact experience. Captain, Marcus said quietly, I'm reading some kind of malfunction on the ship that looks like a musical instrument. Their power systems are fluctuating. Sarah opened her channel again. The ship on your left flank, the one with the curved design, you're showing power fluctuations. You might want to shut down non-essential systems before you have a complete failure. There was frantic activity on the alien communication channels as they tried to contact the ship in question. After a few minutes, a new face appeared on screen, this one looking like a cross between a bird and a computer. This is Chief Engineer Werklick of the Harmonic Resonance. How did you detect our power fluctuations? Our own sensors hadn't registered the problem yet. We're monitoring your energy signatures, Sarah explained. It's just basic safety protocol when you have this many ships in close proximity. We can send over our readings if you'd like. Chief Engineer Werklick's beak-like appendage clicked rapidly. That would be most helpful. Our diagnostic systems are apparently not as sensitive as we believed. Over the next hour, the humans helped the alien fleet identify and solve a dozen different technical problems. Ships were running inefficient engines, others had navigation systems that couldn't handle formation flying, and several were suffering from what Marcus diagnosed as too much fancy decoration interfering with sensor arrays. You know, Sarah said during a brief break in the technical discussions, maybe we should start this first contact over. Why don't you all find comfortable positions, get your technical issues sorted out, and then we can have a proper conversation. High Ambassador Galthera's crystalline form had shifted to a warmer, more relaxed color. Captain Chen, I believe that is the most sensible suggestion we have heard in quite some time. But what about the protocols? Sarah smiled. Maybe it's time to write some new protocols, ones that actually work. The alien fleet began to disperse, ships moving to more practical positions where they could maintain stability without constant course corrections. For the first time since their arrival, they looked like a real fleet instead of an elaborate but fragile sculpture. Captain, said Harmonist Nexus, we came here to welcome you to the galactic community and share our wisdom with your species. Instead, you have been sharing your wisdom with us. This is unexpected. That's what neighbors do, Sarah replied. They help each other out. Isn't that what being part of a community is all about? The alien representatives looked at each other with what might have been dawning realization. Maybe the galaxy had been approaching first contact all wrong. Maybe instead of trying to impress new species with displays of power and ancient rituals, they should have been trying to understand them and learn from them. Captain Chen, said Battle Sage Thormund, would you be willing to continue this conversation? It seems we have much to learn from each other. Sarah raised her teacup in a small toast. We'd be honored. After all, we're neighbors now. Part 2. When aliens learned human logic. 3 days later, the first official cultural exchange in galactic history was taking place aboard the newly renamed ship Practical Wisdom, formerly known as the Eternal Ceremonial Majesty. The alien delegation had decided that if they were going to learn from humans, they should probably start with more practical names for their ships. Dr. Elena Vasquez was trying not to laugh as she watched the galaxy's greatest minds struggle with what humans considered basic problem-solving. Elena taught engineering at a community college in New Mexico and had volunteered for the exchange because she was curious about alien technology. She had expected to be overwhelmed by advanced galactic science. Instead, she found herself giving basic troubleshooting advice. The issue with your fusion reactors, Elena explained to Chief Engineer Werklick, is that you're making them too complicated. Look at this design. She pulled up a holographic display showing the alien power systems. You have 17 different safety protocols running simultaneously, backup systems for your backup systems, and monitoring equipment that requires its own power source. Chief Engineer Werklick's feathers rustled with what might have been embarrassment. But surely such complexity is necessary for safety. These reactors power entire civilizations. That's exactly why they should be simple, Elena said. The more complex a system is, the more ways it can break down. On Earth, we have a rule. The best engineering is elegant engineering. It does exactly what it needs to do, nothing more, nothing less. She pulled up a human fusion reactor design on the display. It looked almost primitive compared to the alien version, with clean lines and minimal components. This reactor produces 90% of the power your design does, but it has 1/10 the number of parts. That means 1/10 the chance of something going wrong. Master Technician Zarvak of the Machine Collective rolled forward on his mechanical legs, his optical sensors focused on the human design. But where are the redundant safety systems? The backup power couplers, the emergency containment protocols, built into the basic design, Elena explained. See how the reaction chamber is shaped. If something goes wrong, the fusion reaction naturally shuts itself down. You don't need a complicated system to shut it down because it's designed to be inherently safe. The room full of alien engineers was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Chief Engineer Weirklick spoke. "We have been building reactors for 3,000 years. Our designs have grown more elaborate with each generation as we added new safety features and capabilities. But you are suggesting that we have been building in the wrong direction." "Not wrong," Elena said gently. "Just overcomplicated. Sometimes the best way to improve something is to take parts away, not add them." On the other side of the ship, Professor Tom Mitchell was having a similar conversation with the galaxy's leading philosophers and strategists. Tom taught high school history in Ohio and had volunteered because he wanted to understand how different civilizations thought about conflict and cooperation. "The problem with your diplomatic protocols," Tom was explaining to a group of very serious-looking aliens, "is that they assume everyone wants the same thing. But different species have different needs and different ways of thinking." High Philosopher Mentorus of the Wisdom Keepers floated in his meditation pod, his ancient mind processing this new concept. But the protocols have been refined over thousands of years. They represent the accumulated wisdom of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. "I'm sure they do," Tom said. "But they were created by those civilizations, for those civilizations. What works for you might not work for someone else. On Earth, we've learned that the best diplomacy starts with listening, not talking." "But how can one listen effectively without proper protocols?" asked diplomatic sage Yelnera, her tentacles writhing with confusion. "Without structure, communication becomes chaos." Tom pulled up a historical example on the display screen. "Let me tell you about the Great Compromise of 1787. The humans who founded my country couldn't agree on how to structure their government. They had big states and small states, different economies, different needs. The established protocols of the times said that power should go to whoever was strongest or richest. The alien diplomats leaned forward, interested despite themselves. But instead of following the old protocols, they did something new. They listened to each other. They found ways to give everyone something they needed. The big states got representation based on population. The small states got equal representation in the Senate. Neither side got everything they wanted, but both sides got enough to make the deal work." "And this compromise was successful?" asked High Philosopher Mentorus. "It's been working for over 250 years, Tom said. "Not perfectly, but it's still working. The key was that they didn't start with a predetermined solution. They started by understanding the problem." Meanwhile, in the ship's engineering bay, Master Mechanic Ralph Johnson was looking at the alien fleet's maintenance records with growing disbelief. Ralph had run a small-town garage for 40 years before retiring, and he had volunteered for the exchange because he was curious about alien machines. "You folks are way overthinking this," Ralph said, scrolling through thousands of pages of maintenance protocols. "Look at this. To change a simple power coupling, you have to fill out 17 different forms, get approval from 5 different departments, and wait for a certified technician to be available. On Earth, that's a 10-minute job." Senior Maintenance Coordinator Blixsnort's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "But proper procedures ensure quality and safety. These protocols have prevented countless accidents." "Have they?" Ralph asked. "Or have they just made simple problems into big problems? Look at this maintenance log. The ship Ethereal Dream has been waiting 3 weeks for someone to fix a faulty door sensor. In the meantime, the crew has to climb through a window to get to the bridge. The proper technician was not available," Blixsnorp explained. "Only a grade 7 sensor specialist or higher is qualified to work on bridge systems." Ralph looked at the technical specifications for the sensor. It was a simple proximity detector, not much different from the ones used in automatic doors back on Earth. "This is a basic switch. Any mechanic with a week of training could fix this in 5 minutes." "But what if they make a mistake?" asked Assistant Coordinator Vrimple. "What if the improper repair causes a cascade failure?" "Then you fix the cascade failure," Ralph said. "But more likely, you just have a working door sensor. Sometimes the risk of doing nothing is bigger than the risk of doing something." The alien maintenance staff looked at each other uncertainly. The idea of actually fixing things quickly instead of following elaborate procedures was revolutionary. "Ralph," said Blixnorp slowly, "would you be willing to show us how you would repair this sensor?" Ralph grinned. "Sure thing. Hand me a basic toolkit, and 5 minutes. Let's get that door working." As the cultural exchange continued, patterns began to emerge. The galaxy's great civilizations had spent thousands of years perfecting systems that were elaborate, ceremonial, and often completely impractical. They had protocols for everything, but the protocols had become more important than the actual goals they were supposed to achieve. The humans, on the other hand, approached problems with a simple question: what are we actually trying to accomplish here? They weren't impressed by complexity or tradition. They wanted to know if something worked, and if it didn't work, they wanted to fix it. "The fascinating thing," Dr. Vasquez explained to a group of alien scientists, "is that you have all the knowledge you need to solve these problems. You just got so focused on doing things the right way that you forgot to ask whether the right way was actually working." Chief Engineer Werklick had been working with Elena to redesign the power systems on his ship. The new design was simpler, more efficient, and much easier to maintain. "Dr. Vasquez, why do you think your species approaches problems so differently than ours?" Elena thought for a moment. "Maybe because we're young. We haven't had time to develop elaborate traditions. When something doesn't work, we try something else. We don't have thousands of years of 'this is how we've always done it' holding us back. But surely experience and tradition have value," asked Master Technician Zarvek. "Of course they do," Elena agreed. "But they should inform your decisions, not control them. The goal isn't to follow tradition. The goal is to solve problems and make things better." High Ambassador Galthera had been listening to these conversations with growing interest. As the senior diplomatic representative, she was responsible for reporting back to the Galactic Council about Earth's suitability for membership in the galactic community. "Captain Chen," she said during the evening meal, "we came here to evaluate your species for membership in our civilization. We expected to find a primitive culture that needed our guidance and wisdom. Instead, we find ourselves learning from you. This was not anticipated in any of our protocols." Sarah smiled. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the best relationships are the ones where everyone learns from everyone else." "But this changes everything," Velthera said. "If your approach to problems is superior to ours, then perhaps we should be asking to join your civilization, not the other way around." "Why does anyone have to join anyone else's civilization?" asked Tom Mitchell. "Why can't we just be partners? Different species working together, each contributing what they do best." The alien representatives looked at each other with dawning realization. They had been thinking in terms of hierarchy and membership, of superior and inferior civilizations. The humans were suggesting something entirely different: cooperation between equals. "This is revolutionary," whispered High Philosopher Mentorus. "If we abandon the concept of galactic hierarchy, if we treat all species as potential partners rather than subjects, then maybe we can actually solve some of the galaxy's problems," finished Battle Sage Thormund, "instead of spending all our time maintaining the status quo." The cultural exchange continued for another week, with humans and aliens working together on practical problems. They'd redesigned ship systems, streamlined diplomatic protocols, and developed new approaches to interspecies communication. By the end of the week, the alien fleet was operating more efficiently than it had in centuries. "You know," said Ralph as he finished teaching a group of alien mechanics how to troubleshoot engine problems, "this has been the most fun I've had since I retired. It's nice to work on something that actually matters. And it's nice to actually fix things instead of just managing them," replied Blixnorp, who had become Ralph's most enthusiastic student. As the exchange came to an end, High Ambassador Galthera made an announcement that would change galactic history. "The Galactic Council has made a decision," she said. "We no longer wish to welcome Earth into our civilization. Instead, we would like to invite Earth to help us create a new kind of galactic community, one based on partnership, practical problem solving, and mutual respect." Captain Sarah Chen raised her cup of tea and another small toast. That sounds like the kind of galaxy we'd like to be part of. When do we start? And so began the Great Galactic Reform, a movement that would spread across the galaxy as species after species discovered that the best solutions were often the simplest ones, and that sometimes the most advanced civilizations had the most to learn from their newest neighbors. The humans had done what they did best. They had looked at a complicated problem, asked, "What are we actually trying to accomplish here?" and found a better way to do it. The galaxy would never be the same.